English translation. 115th contact. Thursday, the 19th of October, 1978, 1804 HRS.
You have given me worries, my dear friend. You should not have refused to come to a meeting. But not only was I worried, but also my father and Quetzal as well as all the others. Therefore, father has also come along today.
I understand you already, but there was simply no other option for me. I first had to have various things clarified before I could see you again.
If I understand correctly, you want to say with this that you would have never held to the contacts anymore if the things had not been clarified?
Exactly, Ptah, so it was meant by me.
Are you serious?
Certainly.
You could have simply done that without further explanations?
Certainly.
I do not understand that. Again and again you give me new riddles.
He really would have done that, and I also know why.
I am also of this view.
But why then? I do not understand that. After all, he would have destroyed everything.
That would have been the case, but it would have also had its justification. Consider, my child, that already for a long time, our friend has sought to explain all possible instructive knowledge to his friends and members of the group and to make them knowing through this, but over and over again. And this already for years. Very serious failures arise, which are solely due to the fact that, completely deliberately, ones act contrary to his explanations. In various cases, it even happens over and over again that, completely deliberately, the teaching presented to them about this is ignored because they, with their personal egoism and jealously, cannot agree with it, as this is also the case with various other matters of an emotional nature and material desires and other things. And since this has already been going on in such a manner for years, the measure quite simply had to become fulfilled once, and our friend had to take self-protection measures. That is why he acted in such a manner and would have also truly broken off contact with us if something grave had not changed. That is how I see these things. Is this right, my friend?
You hit the nail right on the head.
I have also seen the same.
Now I understand. And I honestly have to say to this, that very much more was expected of you, my dear friend, and was laid on you in tasks, works, and obligations than what a human being is really able to bear. But nevertheless, you have taken everything upon yourself without ever murmuring and have fulfilled your duties, if sometimes also somewhat delayed. But still, you have always completed everything and have even done much more than what you actually should do, as we know this now. Indeed, we were not able to recognize these things properly for some time and thus also did not understand, but then the cognition also spread out in us. And if you have now acted in this manner, that you did not appear at our contacts, even though we prompted you to them several times recently, then I understand that now and can give you no reproach. The whole thing is obviously such as what Father has stated, that you simply could not continue anymore because various members of the group always acted incorrectly, and everything had to be so tiring for you. I honestly have to say that I myself would have never borne everything for so long in this manner, and that very much more was added to you in works, obligations, and tasks than what a human being is able to cope with. Another human being in your position would have already collapsed after a few weeks or months, and either would not have recovered from their collapse, or, if they did, would not have continued their task.
I am also of this view.
That is of correctness.
Surely.
So, and I'm not asked about this at all, eh? I find that your words go a bit beyond observations and are perhaps aimed at pepping me up morally, so that I will continue in the old trot. Everything sounds so damn much like adulation that I cannot close my mind to this impression. The truth is simply this. It has been on the notice board for me, and I did not want to get in contact with you again or continue everything anymore under any circumstances if 2 or 3 important things had not changed in our group. In particular, Something was in my gut, which I had already explained umpteen times over and over again to the group. But this simply did not want to be accepted. So namely the matter with love, concerning which views prevail in certain group members, which cannot be reconciled with the truth and reality, which is why I have now also taken the trouble to once explain the law of love once with a small article. See here, these pages, these contain my draft relating to this, for which I would be very happy if one of you could still study this today, in order then to tell me whether, or to what extent, everything is right, and what still needs to be changed in it.
That is good. I will take your writing to hand if you want to give it to me.
Of course, here. Many thanks for your trouble.
You owe me no thanks. But hear what I would first like to explain to you. My friend and I have finally succeeded in designing and constructing the apparatus intended for you, according to which you are to come to me once every 8 days starting from next week, in order to let yourself be treated.
Okay, quite dear thanks for that, also to your friend. But while I am already at it, I still have a question concerning the Sohar Center. You once told me recently that you have automated everything in the control disk, according to which after a 90-minute resting period of a person, a new storage automatically enters into function again. This information was, unfortunately, given outside of our actual contact conversation, according to which I do not have this in writing now, and thus, it cannot be made accessible to the other group members. Hence, could you still quickly explain these things to me once more?
That is of correctness. And so, I will state the data once again. For security for the future and the possibility of a central incarnation, the Sohar Center was built to our specifications by your group members. The Sohar Center, however, holds dangers in itself, in reference to the possibility of dubious use by outsiders and evil-intentioned ones, so that no opportunity is offered to such elements to make use of the Sohar Center for a central incarnation. Everything is to be automated in the future time in such a manner that a fluidal power registration becomes totally eliminated right away, as soon as an unauthorized person wants to make use of the center. This automation proceeds from the fact that a certain rotation in the times of use of the Sohar Center must be kept and completed, and that the elimination of the stored forces of the unauthorized person concerned must take place immediately, as soon as an error in the time of use and the rotation appears. In a simply stated and explained manner, it looks like this: to simplify all things related to the Sohar Center, and so that in the future, all such concerns can be determined by the core group members. Without them requiring any data or information from us, everything became automated in the following data and work values: purely internal group interests and data. In addition, it is still to be explained that the automatic control mechanism built into the control disk is not functioning in the desired form, because some special technological accessories are still to be installed. Thus, the automatic control mechanism still presently functions in the manner that, with an erroneous occurrence of a new storage that is not kept in its precisely prescribed values, a total elimination of all stored fluidal powers of all previously registered group members results. But this should not mean any danger if the persons responsible for the Sohar Center adhere to the required times and are always mindful of the fact that the 90 minutes are not exceeded.
Good, then that is now clear. By when do you think that this machine will function completely?
By the 2nd or 3rd of November, it should be possible for me that I can still complete everything. Until then, you just have to be careful enough that no errors occur, because I would hardly be able to change them, which means that a new storage would absolutely have to be kept until then, if one would appear. Otherwise, all storage of all group members would become eliminated. I was not able to regulate this differently because I have to solve some problems so that, in the future, any negative forces are automatically eliminated if such should go into action through any person in the Sohar Center, and indeed already upon their delivery, so that the same thing cannot happen some other time, as this was the case with Amata.
I find that good. Then in the future, a very serious problem is indeed solved through this.
That is of correctness. We must be able to be absolutely certain in the future that such Ausartungen, having gotten very badly out of control of the good human nature, or the like, will not happen anymore. Which is why I have to change everything. Many group members have given me occasion to act in such a manner because I had to find out, through their thoughts and actions, that everything is not addressed and done with sufficient seriousness, and that everything is often even willfully handled in a malicious manner. Thus it has arisen that all possible safety precautions are truly not only appropriate, but also necessary.
You are probably right about that, unfortunately.
It is of correctness, I know, but now I will devote myself to your writing, while you shall be oriented by Sim, Yase, and Ptah about many future events, as I promised you at our last contact.
Okay, then just go ahead.
You may not make public use, too prematurely, of the data and remarks that my father and I will give you now, and therefore may not disseminate them, only in your group, but not in the public.
Certainly not, I can really be silent.
That is well known to us, for otherwise we would not give you any information.
How is it then with this? May I hand over that which has already happened to the group members in each case? I mean, may I publish the relevant contact pages in each case when the events recorded on them have happened, or when the coming events are forthcoming shortly?
That is granted to you. 2 or 3 days before the arrival of the events, you may openly inform the group members about the impending events, and thus may give them everything in writing.
Sure, for then they cannot cause any damage anymore with the written reports.
Good, thanks, that is really something.
Before I initiate you into these things, I would still like to ask you a favor, which moves me very much. If you come back into the situation that you no longer endure all things, then please do not interrupt your contact with me. Please be aware, always and under all circumstances, that I am your friend and will always try to understand you. Even if you do not want to continue everything anymore, if you should truly decide on that, but I do not exactly hope now that you will do that. Even if you would lay everything down from yourself, you should have the assurance that I would not want to break off the contacts with you, and certainly neither would Father or Quetzal. You should, therefore, be clear to yourself about the fact that even after a laying down of your task, our friendship and connection would continue to exist. I still wanted to tell you this.
That is very kind of you, girl, and it is damn—
My daughter speaks from my heart. It really should be like that if sometime you no longer continue, which we do not want to hope for, however.
That is also of correctness for me, because I join this thought in every respect.
Thanks, I thank you all. You can really get to my kidneys, damn it again.
You are unchangeable, even in your emotions.
That is so, and your cannibal should also finally become aware of that. You are not to be changed in any matters. Greet her cordially for me, but tell her that she should think thoroughly about herself and you once. Then she will understand much better. I have found out various things through some analyses, and that is why I say that. At the same time, unfortunately, I also had to note some very deplorable things on her part.
I can already piece some things together.
Sure, because you are indeed right at the source, only that this sometimes gives quite bitter waters from itself. But nevertheless, greet her also for me, and tell her that I carry her with me in love.
You say that very beautifully, my child. By the way, I am to give you all the dearest greetings from all group members and also from some others.
Quite dear thanks for that, and also greet them all for me.
That should also be the case from my side. I wish everyone good welfare and much joy.
I do not want to stand back therewith. Pay all my dear and cordial greetings as well.
I will do that, but may I quickly bother you once again, Quetzal?
Do you have a question?
I do, my son. You know that I have a new typewriter, and I would like to try to type the contact reports with this in the future. Would it be possible, perhaps, that you could do something so that I can do this? You know that all the other machines are out of the house, which means that I practically do not use them anymore and have passed them on, and now other people type on them.
I understand. You can only use these apparatuses with difficulty because they have somehow become foreign to you, and due to other people working with them, the mechanics have shifted, whereby you would have difficulties.
Exactly, that is it. Do you also have the same problems yourselves, then?
Sure.
Aha. Is that perhaps also one of the reasons that all or at least many of you have your own beam ships?
That is the true reason that is of correctness. We only use other apparatuses of any kind that are not adapted to us as some circumstances require it.
Aha, that is interesting. But how does it stand now with the fact that I can use my new Adler typewriter for typing the contact reports?
If you can maybe wait for 5 to 8 days before I will transmit the report to you, then it can probably be arranged that I can develop an electronic speed inhibition and install it in the transmitter. Thus, you could then write in a slower form because the transmission would come to you more slowly.
Good, thanks. With that, I could also correct serious spelling errors and such to some extent because I have a mechanical error correction key on the new machine.
Then I will take care of it, but you still have to wait a little, as I already told you. It may take several days, maybe 5 to 8, before I am ready.
That is fine, many thanks.
Then now, I can inform you of the other things, or do you still have another question?
No, not at the moment. Perhaps later, so just calmly begin at once.
So then listen carefully. As the first sign of the advanced fulfillment of the determined turning point, a sect massacre will take place, for which many political personalities will bear great guilt. Through murder and forced mass suicide, some 200 children and about 1,023 adult human beings will meet death, but out of all these, only a number of approximately 1,000 will yet be discovered. This tragedy will occur in Jonestown, a settlement site in Guyana, named after the megalomaniacal and consciousness-impaired sect leader Jim Jones, who, with a large part of his fanatical followers, influenced under hypnosis, has immigrated to Guyana and created a settlement site there where he holds his believers like slaves. Through recommendation letters of many political personalities of America, he has succeeded in the immigration with his followers into Guyana, where he leads a barbaric regiment. By the time after the middle of November, it will have come so far that he evokes a massacre through compulsion, hypnosis, and fanaticism, to which well over 1,000 human beings will fall victim. Very many will voluntarily take a poison offered to them and will also kill their children with this, while others will be forced to do so, and the remainder will fall by bullets of murderous hands. The extremely degenerate sect, called People's Temple or People's Church Union, is very active politically and is supported by American politicians who bear very great guilt for the fact that it can come to this horrible massacre, as these were the ones who paved and opened all ways for the insane Jim Jones's doings.
That is indeed horrifying. Is there no possibility, then, to prevent all that? Something must still be able to be done.
No, there is no possibility, for these events must happen because very many important effects are connected with these, which will take place particularly in America. You yourself will then play an authoritative role in this, because after the events, you shall then direct a message from us to the American government and to the American people.
And what should this message contain, then?
You will learn that at the given point in time.
Fine, but how do you imagine that I should reach the American government? If I write to them, they will never receive my message. I know this from experience.
That will not be so, for today you maintain the authoritative contacts, so the message will reach its destination. We will still give you corresponding instructions in this connection. This task is incumbent upon you and us even then, when things shall happen between us, which will be very unpleasant.
What now should that mean?
You will see within a short time. But do you still promise me that you will take on this task anyway? For various reasons, we cannot do this ourselves, and also cannot delegate anyone else, by which I mean Earth humans, who, unfortunately, are not available to us apart from you.
Okay, I will not chicken out. That is a promise.
Sure, you tend to keep your promises in honor, but be aware that the fulfillment of the same will come very hard for you because very unpleasant things will happen.
You can count on it. I will not avoid my duty, not in any manner.
That is a word on your part, as one cannot expect it any differently from you. I am very grateful to you.
Nonsense, make no fuss of it. Tell me rather, what all is still coming for the world, which you wanted to tell me anyway. At the same time, it would also interest me very much whether the Shah of Persia will really be overthrown after the new year, and be expelled from Iran as I had calculated. On the other hand, I also wonder whether the Adept Voyager 1 sent out by the USA will obtain good results at Jupiter.
According to our calculations of the flight path of the probe, this has to pass very close to the star and to several moons of Jupiter, which means that good results have to be obtained if the apparatuses of the observation equipment work flawlessly.
Does that mean, therefore, that the time comes when the scientists will discover that the so-called red spot of Jupiter is, in truth, a self-rotating funnel-shaped storm hole in the wildly surging high surface of this unfinished sun, and that this funnel hole forms the center of a gigantic and many thousand-year-old storm? And does this also mean that it will now be found out that not only do Saturn and Uranus have a ring system, but also even Jupiter, only that it is indeed of a very different kind than the other two at Saturn and Uranus?
Surely, that should actually be ascertained, for the probe will be steered so close to the celestial body that it should record these things. But that will hardly be the case because Jupiter's rings consist of nearly invisible particles that are so minutely small and transparent that they can only be registered as clouds with special apparatuses. Jupiter's spot, however, will be recognized as a mighty storm.
And so, will it also not be found out that the ring clouds around Jupiter, to a large extent, consist of tiny particles ejected from large volcanoes of the moon Io, which are, in part, captured by Jupiter, while the greatest part of all the ejected material, however, falls back to Io and, in turn, almost covers up practically all volcanic openings and also falls on the plains and mountains, so that this moon, in contrast to the other Jupiter moons, does not have too large a crater landscape, but rather a fantastic flatness, despite the many craters?
You listened very carefully to my explanations on your flight travels with me and have admirably retained them in memory. Are you still able to remember other things? These facts will, by the way, be ascertained with certainty by the observation equipment.
Well, I naturally still know some things because I have not forgotten everything that you and Ptah explained to me. I can still remember well that the various large moons of Jupiter bore various colors, such as red, yellow, brown, and white, as well as orange. I also remember that you told me that Jupiter should have actually become a sun, but the mass was too small for this star to really be able to develop into a sun. Nevertheless, the whole formation essentially consists of liquid helium and hydrogen. Also, I still know that you or Ptah explained to me that, primarily, potassium salts and sulfur compounds would form the surfaces until deep down inside, and that everything had been deposited as a very thick crust after the enormous masses of water had given way on this satellite. In particular, I think I remember that you said that specifically the moon Io was once completely covered by water. If I remember correctly, you told me, I no longer know whether it was you or Ptah, that the moon Europa is the complete opposite of Io, that the masses of water there did not evaporate and did not change. Rather, they froze into a gigantic sheet of ice. In addition, you told me many other things and gave me explanations, of which I still know a great deal. Thus, you also told me that the moon, which I designated as an enormous chicken egg, is only about 200 kilometers in length. I think it was the next moon of Jupiter, whose name I no longer remember.
You have an admirable memory in all things. The moon, which you have just mentioned, is called Amalthea among you. The moon Io, of which you said something, is, by the way, the most volcanically active planetary body in the Jupiter system. But that was already explained to you at that time, if you can still remember?
Of course I do not forget such things so quickly, At that time, you said that this moon is much more volcanically active than the Earth. Incidentally, I also still remember very well that you explained that the kilometer-wide cloud formations in the storm funnel of Jupiter move at a very high speed and rotate counterclockwise.
Sure, I explained that to you.
I now just wonder whether I still remember correctly about the volcanism on the moon Io. If I am right, you explained that the volcanic eruptions there occurred by elemental power and resembled enormous explosions that hurl out their ejection material like atomic bomb mushrooms, whereby some would reach heights of up to 180 kilometers. Primarily, these should concern dust particles, gases, ash, and a little magma, which reach centrifuge speeds of up to 2,300 kilometers per hour or higher, because through the missing atmosphere of the moon, only a slight opposing force is present. In addition, you said that the greatest part of all ejection material falls back to the moon, as I already mentioned just now. The rest, so you explained, becomes pushed out into space, where a portion is then attracted by Jupiter, and very slowly condenses itself in its ring system into a heavy formation of sulfur ions. Is that right?
Your recollections are very accurate.
Okay, so that is good. What still interests me, and which I no longer know exactly, in Iran, another civil war of short duration is still to break out shortly before the overthrow of the Shah. Do you know when this will be?
Sure, on the 9th, 10th, and 11th of February 1979.
The whole absurdity will indeed cost many human lives, if I am right. Even so, around 1,000 death sentences are then to be carried out afterwards under the auspices of the murderer Khomeini. The whole thing is, in truth, not just purely political from Khomeini's and the Shah's side. Rather, it will happen because Khomeini wants to take revenge on the Shah because the Shah's father let Khomeini's father be murdered long ago. Is that right?
Sure, that is correct.
Good. I just wanted to know that.
Then I can still inform you of other, more important things.
If you permit, I would still have but one more question.
Just ask, for you would indeed give it no rest.
You are probably right about that.
So ask then.
It concerns Vietnam and China. Will China really attack Vietnam at the end of February or something? And will it really be just a pro forma attack, which represents the very first precursor to what repeats itself at a later time, and what will then form the actual starting point of a war? At least by that part which will be started by China, if the thoughts and actions of those responsible do not change to the better.
You know about these things very well, and also know that everything will be inevitable. Thus, it will, in fact, arrive. So why do you ask?
I just wanted a confirmation, nothing more.
You have thus received it. Can I now go on?
Of course, that was for the time being my last question until the next one. Actually, this already fits, but I will gladly still wait with it if you have more important things.
Just ask, for otherwise you will give it no rest.
Once again, you are probably right about that. Well then, my question is this. Your official details about the number of Jupiter's moons are not right because they only correspond to a part of the truth. To my knowledge, this giant planet has 17 larger moons and several smaller ones, as I learned from Ta during the Great Journey.
That is right, but for certain reasons that may not become known on the Earth before the month of September, 1979. After that, this fact will then no longer play a role. By the way, at least 2 other moons of the planet will be discovered by the American scientists in the course of their evaluations of Jupiter's images.
Then it will not be only one?
I told you that they will discover at least 2, after which then only 3 of the larger ones and several of the smaller ones still will not be known to them.
That is indeed something, but I will be silent about that.
That is also of urgent importance, but on the other hand, you are able to be silent without it causing you difficulties. For this reason, I will also entrust to you, likewise under the obligation to maintain secrecy, that a lot will be decided for you and all group members in the next year. As usual, these decisions will be connected with serious lies, destruction attempts, and intrigues, which will primarily go out due to the brothers H and K and their aunt OW, as well as MF, U, and Elsie shall even be taken before a court. But you should not be disturbed by this because through these intrigues, lies, and destruction attempts, you all will be able to register the first great success in reference to the publicizing of your and our mission. Thus, it will be that Japanese television will make a good film in your center about our interests, after which then soon, in the month of September or October 1979, also the first book will be completed and sold.
Human child, that is some piece of news. But why exactly will Japanese television come?
This will be the merits of your American friends. The first book will also be given in print by them, and this work will be one that cannot find its equal on the earth.
Is it the one that Wendell Stevens has written?
No, it concerns another one, filled with your best shots of our beam ships.
There I am but curious. But why then must I be silent about that?
Because through this, many of those of your enemies can still create big lies and intrigues and spread these worldwide, which will then be recognized as such by the film and the book, by which means the spreaders of lies and intrigues will suffer a tremendous defeat and become non-credible all over the world, which is necessary.
Regular psychological warfare.
That is right. It really represents such.
Then I can indeed look forward to everything quite calmly.
Certainly you can do that, for there is no need to worry about it.
Okay, then one may be content. Do you still have other things in stock?
Sure, even very important things, which will also bring you work.
In what manner?
It concerns coming events upon whose occurrence you are to compose a brief writing, in order then to hand this over to various governments of the earth.
You know, nevertheless, that I have already done that several times, but no reaction had ever come from it.
Sure, but you should still strive for these things at the given point in time.
I can do that, of course, but what does it deal with, and what should become of it if no success arrives again?
I will explain the connections to you in a moment. If no reaction should occur upon your efforts, then the work was, unfortunately, in vain. But at the same time, your and our obligation will have been fulfilled, to try a change to the positive for a threatening and serious political turmoil, which can lead to nasty, destructive riots and wars, and those things that were already transmitted to you as prophecies in the year 1976.
You give me a riddle, for I do not know what you're talking about.
Think of the prophecy of the threatening Third World War.
Ah, now the penny has dropped. You speak of the prophecies, in which there is talk of the overthrow of the murderer Emperor Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, of whom you have, indeed, already spoken, and of the death of the Yugoslavian dictator Tito, who shall pass away in the next 3 years, when Saturn shines its light on the earth, and of the invasion of the Soviet-Russian army into Afghanistan at the end of the year 1979, as well as of the re-election of Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister in India and her then following death, which will shake the entire Indian nation, as well as of the alliance of the Americans with various Middle East and Far East countries, to which still the alliance of the Pakistanis with the Chinese comes, along with many other events to be expected.
Sure, I speak of that, but no prophecies were transmitted to you in such detail because those details were not mentioned in them. Those come from your own calculations. At any rate, you have not received them from us.
I am sorry, I have, in fact, somewhat calculated the events to be expected.
My words should not be a reprimand for you.
Then I have misunderstood you.
You probably did not talk about it publicly, but only in your group?
No.
Then everything is indeed good. Have you calculated any other details?
I have namely some political machinations, which must lead to the fact that the ways are actually paved for the fulfillment of the prophecies.
What possibilities have you calculated?
For example, I have discovered, as I already said, that the Pakistanis, and to be sure, the West Pakistanis, will make a military and politico-economic alliance with the Chinese, so these can find unhindered inlet into Pakistan. This must lead then, according to Adam Risa, to the fact that the Chinese will then possibly settle in Pakistan and open the way and appropriate up to the western part of the Indian Ocean, by what means the exit and access road from and to Arabia is then already opened for them, should they want to advance one day, if the prophecy should fulfill itself, into the Middle East, in order to fulfill the prophecy there. In addition, my calculations yielded that the Americans could get involved with the Pakistanis and the Chinese because they have to fear an advance of the Russians from Afghanistan to the Indian Ocean, through which the whole situation becomes even more muddled, and through which the Russians are forced to further steps, which could produce rather bad consequences, and this would be the beginning for the fact that the bear then breaks out, as this is written in the prophecy. Moreover, it also arose from my calculations that the scorpion, even Indira Gandhi, in her nature of instability and intrigue strength, can suddenly take a catastrophe-wielding political step in the direction of Russia, which could mean a renewed threat to overall world peace. For then the Russians would also gain a foothold there, namely in India, and thus would again have a free way to the Indian Ocean, like if they would penetrate through Persia or Pakistan, whose rulers are so childish and inadequate and ignorant that the possibility must also be given to them, that they will pave and open the ways for the Russian army. All the calculations show that the situation could become so very muddled that the right action resulting from it can only be recognized with difficulty. To this still comes the confusions of various non-aligned and other countries up to Europe, as well as the instability and lack of directionality of the leaders of these countries, who are worse than teenage children in their decision-making power and illogic. So also from there, further malicious political threats, intrigues, and unconscious destructive factors are still lurking, which could contribute their part to the beginning of the downfall. Even though at the time of the first world-shaking crisis, after the invasion of the Soviet army into Afghanistan, some super clever special politicians, etc., will claim that a third world war cannot threaten anymore. However, these super clever ones and know-it-alls do not bear in mind that the Third World War will not break out all of a sudden as such, but that, as the beginning already proves, and as it will soon prove itself again after the invasion of the Russian army into Afghanistan, several individual countries will first get together in the wool and allow acts of war to break out from this, before the larger unions of various countries are found, which could then lead to the World War. The UN and NATO will then no longer have anything at all to report about this. And to be sure, already then when the Russians march into Afghanistan, which, incidentally, they have to do at the end of 1979, for they are obligated to do so by a contract. Therefore, they will properly march in there and not make an incident of war, as it will be maintained. The UN and NATO, however, will become jumping jack organizations after this incident, because they have never been so developed in their sphere of influence, as this would have had to be the case. Those responsible of these two organizations, and those involved in them in other ways, were and are, in truth, never capable of developing these organizations into what they basically should have become. Thus, they will not be able to receive enough power and respect for themselves at the given point in time to change, or even just authoritatively influence the threatening world political situation, in order to attain a change to the positive. But at the same time, these leaders are not capable of this, so even they, with their two organizations, cannot change anything in the impending fulfillment of the prophecies. If, within a period of 1 year, the beginning of the one-day possible bitter end in the third millennium begins to develop itself.
China-Japan-USA alliance.
Vague outlines have become visible in recent days. The future military alliance between the USA, China, and Japan, which will be a completely new factor in world politics in the coming years. The driving force behind this new world security concept is China. China is convinced that the Soviet Union is planning a devastating strike before Beijing itself can successfully defend itself against such a thrust. That is why it is now taking the initiative to lean on Japan and the USA economically, in terms of weapons and financially. The trip of the Chinese Party and government leader Hua Guofeng to Tokyo was a very big signal these days. It was the first time ever that China's first man made an effort to visit Japan. And the fact that he called for Japan's rearmament there was the most sensational thing. After all, without Europe noticing it at the time, the Second World War began in 1931 with the Japanese attack on Manchuria. 50 years later, China's communist overlord is strongly in favor of Japan's rearmament. At the same time, China's Vice Premier Geng Biao, responsible for defense, was in Washington. With his negotiating partner, U.S. Defense Secretary Harold Brown, he arranged giant purchases of non-offensive military equipment. Washington is still sticking to its original decision not to supply China with offensive weapons. However, with the testing of an intercontinental ballistic missile capable of carrying nuclear warheads, China has presented its entry ticket into the club of world powers on time just before Geng's trip to Washington. The new three-way constellation is only hazily visible. But it is already a reality. Hans Flegg Blick, Zurich, the 30th of May, 1980.
Visit to Delhi to resolve Indian-Russian irritation over Afghanistan. Brezhnev hopes for Indira Gandhi's loyalty. By our correspondent Olaf Lello.
Delhi, the 8th of December. With its realistic policy, India is making a great contribution to the cause of peace in Asia. Leonid Brezhnev praised the foreign policy of his Afghan protector Babrak Karmal during his recent visit to Moscow, to which he is paying a 4-day official friendly visit this week. So far, the Russians have every reason not to be dissatisfied with the attitude of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who returned to power in January, to the Afghanistan problem. The Kremlin could hardly have expected Delhi to approve the intervention. But India is the only important country in the non-aligned world that has not publicly condemned the invasion and has abstained twice from voting in the United Nations. This was a kindness to Brezhnev, which also brought India closer to the group led by Cuba and Vietnam in the non-aligned movement, which sees the socialist camp as the natural ally of the non-aligned. Is the Earth's second largest nation thus steering a foreign policy course that will make it a de facto Soviet junior partner in South Asia? Today, one hears voices of serious politicians and journalists in Delhi who fear that Nehru's daughter is pursuing this intention and that the Brezhnev visit will give new guidelines for this. However, on the other hand, there are also unmistakable signs and statements that signal irritations in the Indo-Soviet relationship, especially because of the conflict over Afghanistan. The adherents of this school of thought believe that the Kremlin fears that the Prime Minister, who unsentimentally and callously pursues India's national interests alone, might distance herself more from the Soviet Union if Leonid Brezhnev does not come up with binding assurances for a political solution to Afghanistan in Delhi. After all, both theories have one thing in common. No one seems to expect India to want to go down a socialist path domestically. Here, the links to Western economic partners, the scope for the activities of multinational corporations, have rather grown.
Reliable friend.
To avoid premature speculation about a possible cooling of relations between Moscow and Delhi, it is necessary to take a look at the intensity of this cooperation so far. The good relationship with the Kremlin is a constant of Indian foreign policy, which even the 3 years of Morarji Desai's Janata government did not touch. For India owes a lot to the Soviets. Whenever Delhi got into economic or political difficulties, the Kremlin stepped in to help. Under Jawaharlal Nehru in the development of heavy industry, when the Americans tied their participation to unreasonable conditions, with cheap large loans and arms supplies, with political flank protection in the dispute over Kashmir in the annexation of the Portuguese colonial relic Goa, or at the end of 1971 in the Third War with Pakistan over Bangladesh. A recent opinion poll showed that no other state enjoys such trust among Indians as a reliable friend as the Soviet Union. The Russians may also benefit from the fact that, in contrast to the Americans, they are psychologically adept at adjusting to the Indians' exaggerated self-esteem and their occasional moral pride. The Indo-Soviet friendship was also helped by the fact that Moscow's global strategy went well with Delhi's regional hegemonic aspirations, as both sought to keep the influence of China and the USA out of the region. This did not succeed. The Soviet advance to the Khyber Pass, along with the American response, also dangerously limited Delhi's maneuverability. With the concentration of the fleet in the Indian Ocean, the conflict of the superpowers was now carried into the immediate neighborhood of the subcontinent. Indira Gandhi does not blame the Soviet Union alone for this development, but the shift in alliances that began at the beginning of the 1970s. After the Chinese-American rapprochement, this led to completely new international perspectives, to a tricontinental trilateralism against the background of a relapse of the two superpowers into the Cold War. And just as she feels sympathy for an encirclement psychosis of the Soviets, Ms. The Soviet lobby among the advisors of Nehru's daughter, led by former Foreign Minister and Moscow Ambassador T.N. Call, in the face of this analysis of the situation, is of the opinion that only the Soviet Union will continue to be prepared to support India in its strategic goal of consolidating regional dominance in South Asia. Pessimists in Delhi even believe that the Kremlin would be willing to give Indira Gandhi's India the same freedom of action in dealing with Pakistan, Nepal, or Bangladesh as Vietnam was given in Indochina. However, Delhi could boldly break through its own fears of encirclement with a policy that envisages détente with China, if not reconciliation. This would jeopardize relations with Moscow, but on the other hand give India more non-aligned weight in Asia and restore globally lost reputation. In any case, Mrs. Gandhi has a few arrows in her quiver, which could already hurt the Soviets if they continue to ignore India's wishes for a phased withdrawal of troops in the Afghanistan debate. No one can be sure of Indira's political loyalty, not even Leonid Brezhnev. Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, the 9th of December 1980.
An eye-opener in the Afghan-Pakistan border area war begins east of the Kunar.
About 30 Soviet tanks pushed their way along the narrow asphalted road on the west bank of the Kunar River. Their crews shoot at anything that moves. The surrounding mountains are combat bases of the Mujahideen, the Afghan resistance fighters. Every morning, a Russian tank column appears to clean the area. The Kunar River flows here inside Afghanistan, parallel to the Afghan-Pakistani border. In this area, it forms the demarcation line up to which the Red Army conducts its military operations. While life goes on as normal on the bank of the river facing Pakistan, fighting rages regularly further west. In between, the torrential clay-colored floods of the Kunar, which is about 200 meters wide. On the peaceful eastern side, the path to the river leads past small villages with mud huts and irrigated fields. Wheat, maize, and poppy are cultivated here. For centuries, the farmers have been threshing and plowing with the same simple implements. They pay little attention to the visitor. Beyond the river, the villages are abandoned and the fields neglected. Months ago, the inhabitants fled to Pakistan with all their belongings: goats, sheep, poultry. There are no farmers in this area, only the Soviet soldiers are there. They have set up their tent camps between the villages of Shigal and Bachi. All day long, the Red Army is shelling the surrounding mountains, where the Mujahideen have their hideouts among rocks and trees. They do not know where the resistance fighters are hiding, and with their attacks they want above all to prevent them from approaching the river and making contact with insurgents on Pakistani territory. So far, no Russian has set foot on the eastern bank of the Kunar, which faces Pakistan. However, reconnaissance helicopters regularly fly over the area. Obviously, the Soviets have set up their defensive line on the Kunar, which is supposed to stop the movement of resistance fighters between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Nevertheless, night after night, the Mujahideen try to cross the river to supply their comrades inside Afghanistan with food and ammunition. The resistance fighters holding out in the mountains, however, are increasingly lacking food, medicine, and weapons. Not a single bag of tea or flour has crossed the river in a week. The resistance fighters cannot approach the riverbank because Soviet tanks are constantly rolling along the road between Jalalabad and Asmar. There are no doctors here. The Mujahideen have only medical self-help left. One of the guides confirmed that the guerrillas sometimes give their severely wounded the coup de grace because the injured cannot be transported and represent a major risk factor for the rest of the group. Rumors have been circulating in Afghan resistance circles for some time that the Soviets are preparing for guerrilla warfare. For example, the Red Army has already laid thousands of mines to prevent the Mujahideen from crossing the river and the passes into Pakistan TA of Thursday. On the eastern bank of the Kunar, farmers have formed communities for security reasons. Every evening, a different woman cooks dinner for all the residents of the surrounding farms. While sipping their green tea, the farmers on the opposite bank can see the clouds of smoke from the last bombardment and hear the tanks and helicopters. If they come here, we will also take up arms, they declare. 2 Kalashnikov assault rifles ready to fire lean against a wall. Pierre Carroll, AFP Tagesanzeiger, Zurich, the 11th of July, 1980.
Unsuitable and unready material. NATO's air superiority? Just an illusion?
Aircraft invisible to enemy radar systems under development. London AFP, the qualitative superiority of NATO's air forces over those of the Warsaw Pact states is more than ever an illusion. This is the conclusion of Jane's All the World's Aircraft, the yearbook on world aerospace production, in its latest issue 1980/81. Moreover, NATO is spending its resources on material that cannot be used in the weather conditions that prevail most of the time in Europe. Even more worrying is the low readiness of many NATO weapons.
New developments in the West.
Among the positive developments, the yearbook lists the development in the United States of an aircraft that is invisible to enemy radar system stealth. Another development welcomed by Janes is the Harrier vertical takeoff aircraft, mainly thanks to its excellent helicopter combat capabilities. Finally, as in previous issues, the 1980/81 yearbook also defends the British-German-Italian joint production Tornado. The multi-role aircraft is the centerpiece of the programs to modernize the European air forces.
Financial misery with the Tornado.
Bonn DDP, despite harsh criticism of Federal Defense Minister Appel SPD by the CDU and CSU and partly also by his party friends because of the financial crisis of the multi-role combat aircraft MRCA Tomato, Federal Chancellor Helmut Schmidt has again backed his minister. The project is much more expensive than planned. In 1980, 1.4 billion marks were spent on it. The basic decision on the Tornado had already been made in 1967, Schmidt said when Gerhard Schröder, CDU, was defense minister and Willy Brandt, SPD, foreign minister. In Schmidt's opinion, it must now be discussed how to prevent such events from happening again. Zurich Oberland Wetzikon, the 11th of December, 1980.
You have dealt with these matters very thoroughly, so not just a little. Yes, your remarks, unfortunately, correspond to the bitter truth. But some things could still be changed for the better in everything if you would compose an explanatory writing and submit it to the governments, and if your remarks would then be dealt with, which is not clear, unfortunately. But still, you should write these remarks and declarations at the appropriate time, and to be sure in the month of February 1980, and submit these to the state governments of the earth.
If that is your wish, then I will do it, of course. But to tell the truth, I expect nothing of it, for one will not listen to a single human being, especially when he is labeled as a spinner and visionary, as this is the case with me.
Nevertheless, you should do it.
Okay, your wish shall also be mine. Then should I also mention details and exact data with this? Like, for example, the date of death of Tito and that of Indira, as well as the sad and murderous misery that will break out in Persia after the taking over of power of the insane Ayatollah Khomeini. And should I also mention the inglorious end of this one, and of the murderous Shah which approaches the two.
No, you may not make any public announcements about that, as this would lead to confusions and catastrophes for which you could never take responsibility.
Then those events are also taboo, which will happen in Germany, Switzerland, and in America, and which will also range outside of politics.
You must also be officially silent about those, also about what will occur in the South American countries, in Africa, and in various European countries in bloody events of a political and criminal form. You should also make no more predictions, as I have already advised you.
By that,
Do you mean only the politically criminal ones, which will exhibit unusual degeneracies in the future, or the criminally criminal ones, which will fall into similar malicious courses like the political ones?
It applies to everything.
And what about the fanatical murders, suicides, and massacres from the religious sectarians and terrorists who will start regular slaughters? And what about, for example, the Queen of Holland, who should resign, according to my calculations, in the spring of 1980? Do I also have to be silent about that?
Change on the Dutch throne. Beatrix beamed, Juliana wept.
Amsterdam. The day began like a fairy tale. On her 71st birthday, Queen Juliana of the Netherlands abdicated the day before yesterday in a solemn ceremony at the Royal Palace in Amsterdam and transferred the royal dignity to her daughter Beatrix, 42. A short time later, the festive enthronement took place in the neighboring new church. In a velvet robe adorned with Hermelias, the new monarch took the constitutional oath at the side of her husband Prince Claus in front of 3,000 dignitaries. She thanked Juliana for the motherly care with which she had accompanied her daughter through life until her accession to the throne. Juliana, who held the hand of her husband Prince Bernhard during this speech, burst into tears and had to fish for a handkerchief. Those present acknowledged the gesture with thunderous applause. The royal family was then celebrated by the crowd from a balcony on Dam Square. But by then, the fairy tale day had already turned into a nightmare. Smoke bombs exploded, and the noise of the first street battles between demonstrators and police could be heard from afar, which degenerated into a veritable orgy of violence in the evening. Blick, Zurich, the 2nd of May, 1980.
If it concerns such harmless things, like the resignation of this queen, then the disclosure of your knowledge plays no major role, for this queen is not in a world political situation that could provoke the important changes through an early disclosure of the fact that she wants to leave her office. In addition, until now, I knew nothing about the fact that this queen wants to rid herself of her office. Do your calculations relating to this agree?
I think so. Have you not dealt with these things then?
No, because so far there was no reason to do so, for the country of this queen is, for the time being, of no major importance because the foreign policy of this country has a correspondingly flat form.
Oh, I see. But what about the terrorist and sectarian occurrences, etc.?
Also about those, I must obligate you to be silent publicly.
Okay, then just so be it. It gives me no joy anyway to bring these things to the man. On the other hand, it is also pointless because the human beings also would not change through this. And thirdly, I would only be insulted even more as being crazy and a visionary.
Sure, by this you can save yourself that. Have you even calculated other coming events?
No, I've not dealt with any more.
Then I would still like to tell you other things, which will be of importance for you. The first one is associated with your work that you are to do in the month of February 1980.
Then it shall even be so, but in addition, still another question. What we have discussed just now, may I announce this then, since it will, indeed, be in the contact reports?
You may surely do that then, since you did not mention more exact details. But now, I would like to tell you the other interests and still ask you whether you have also made calculations concerning the Olympic Games in the year 1980, part of which is to be held in Russia.
No, why, should I have done that?
No, it just would have been interesting for you, and moreover, I could have saved myself some explanations.
No, I have not dealt with that. I would not have known why I should have done that. These games are, after all, not of so much importance that they could have a determining influence on the upcoming world situation, right? The Olympics are, after all, a non-political affair, and were also brought into life in this form. To my knowledge, if I am not mistaken, the founder of the Olympic Games was named Pelopon, a distant descendant of a Minoan philosopher. In the year 468 BC, called these games into life, and he regulated the fact that games take place every 4 years in a sporting fashion with fistfights, horseback riding and horseback riding games with long-distance running armed sports fights with speakers, poets, philosophers, and artists of all types. Even a sort of pentathlon was already brought into life by him. His condition at the founding of the Olympic Games was that at these competitions, members of all Hellenic tribes and Minoans should meet together uniformly and peacefully, as well as inhabitants of other lands, by which means a peaceful coexistence should be created and a true peace should be developed. Furthermore, his condition was that political disagreements or even acts of war between various states involved in these games and competitions should never be a reason for these states or their athletes, etc., not to participate in these peaceful competitions. His condition singly came from the fact that the Olympic Games may never be used as a means for political pressure, or otherwise as some other peace-interfering means.
Your remarks regarding these matters are astonishingly exact, but in one respect you are very mistaken. The Olympic Games have, unfortunately, already been caught in the wheels of the politics of the earthly governments for many decades, and this will be openly expressed to the world for the first time in the year 1980.
That is just unreal. Is it because of the fact that the invasion of the Russian army will take place at the end of 1979?
You are very clever and think very quickly. Sure, that will be the reason.
Then I can already imagine what will come. First, the Americans will cry out and will try to undermine or boycott the Olympic Games in Russia. Then soon, a wide variety of America-friendly countries will unanimously join in this wolf howling, and will enforce a worldwide Olympic boycott. And with certainty, also approximately at least 50% of the Swiss population will be involved in this indelicate dance because most Swiss, in truth, never behave neutrally and pursue the dirtiest politics, of which they do not have the slightest notion, however. But maybe it is good that this will happen because through this, then, the world public will one day understand and clearly learn whose brainchild a large mass of the Swiss people really is, and above all, where the much-vaunted neutrality lies and how far this reaches.
That really is a dirty swine business.
I think, and to be sure, both this phony neutrality of many Swiss and, on the other hand, that such a dirty intrigue of an Olympic boycott can ever take place at all, that politics ever interfere in these competitive games at all. That contradicts, in every form, the original ideas, wishes, and conditions of the founder of the games as well as the old, traditional, sincere efforts of all those human beings who have participated in these games for nearly 3 millennia in a peaceful and condition-fulfilling form. That really is a rather damned and dirty mess, and those who cook up this mess are just as hopeless swine as those who support this. I would like to have said that with an absolutely neutral opinion, and in regard to the fact that I regard the conditions, in terms of peace, peacemaking, and everything associated with it, of the founder of the Olympic competitions, as probably the most admirable accomplishment ever of an earth human. But what's the use of this, if some swine, who still call themselves earth humans, make this probably best idea and accomplishment of a far-thinking and peace-loving human being simply unscrupulous, just so that they can prove their power through this and likewise hide their dirty anxiety, as well as their absolute inability to govern and to make the right decisions that would finally create a global peace. But these fellows neither have any idea of how to lead a humanity, nor a clue about leading a single people, not to mention that they should feel bound to a promise that their original forefathers made and swore, to create peace on the earth at last. Oh, damn it. How damn dirty these swine must really be. Oh, damn it, damn!
Central Committee caught delegates off guard yesterday in Regensdorf. Shooters, Moscow boycott.
Zurich, Swiss shooters will boycott the Olympic Games in Moscow. This was declared yesterday at the Ordinary Delegates meeting of the Rifle Association in Regensdorf by President Theo Kramer. There was no conversation among the delegates. "This matter belongs to the responsibility of the Central Committee," said Kramer. "We take the responsibility." Our decision was unanimous. With that, the boycott declaration at the DP lasted all of 26 seconds. "This is a joke," raged Pistol World Champion Moritz Minder. "I find that beneath contempt." In less than half a minute, our years of training were swept under the table. But I'm not giving up hope quite yet. The impetus for the boycott came from the former president of the Matschützen, Kurt Vogelsanger, of all people, who submitted the boycott application to the Central Committee. But not everything else went smoothly at the delegates' meeting yesterday either. With a rather clumsy voting tactic, President Kramer screwed up the increase of the sports contribution by about 400,000 francs shortly before the good to print. First, the delegates approved an increase of the ammunition price by 1 centime with 102 to 93 votes. But the president had made a formal error. And in the second vote, the delegates then referred the increase back to the Central Committee for further discussion by 88 votes to 87.
Rescue attempts of the Western Enochs.
Rome. With an 8-point program, the 18 national Olympic committees of Western European countries meeting in Rome want to force a worldwide participation in Moscow after all. The most important points: no athletes, only one flag bearer at the opening ceremony, only Olympic anthem and flag, no political statements during speeches, no participation in the Olympic youth camp in Moscow. Further decision in Rome: only a radical structural reform of the Games can save this event for the future. J. Erwin Brazerol Blick, Zurich, the 4th of May, 1980.
Japanese not in Moscow.
Zurich. The Japanese are also not going to Moscow. Representing one of the last major sports nations, the Japanese National Olympic Committee voted 29-13 to boycott the Summer Games. Whereupon NOK President Shibata announced his resignation. On the day of the closing date for entries, both Moscow and Washington celebrated their cause as a great victory. Moscow spoke of an overwhelming commitment to the Olympic Games and of a heavy defeat and evil loss of prestige by U.S. President Carter. The U.S. State Department said the boycott call was an extraordinary success. Half of all medal contenders had been eliminated. Of the nations with Olympic champions in Montreal 1976, the USA 34 gold, the FRG 10, Japan 9, South Korea and Norway 1 each, are not taking part in Moscow. 4 Swiss sports federations: fencing, equestrian, shooting, gymnastics, boycott the Games. 12 are taking part. Sonntagsblick, Zurich, the 25th of May, 1980.
Eastern Bloc reacts to FRG's Olympic boycott.
Sigh, a clear reaction of the Eastern Bloc countries to the Olympic boycott of the Federal Republic of Germany is becoming increasingly apparent. The GDR and Czechoslovakia have just canceled their participation in the Kiel Sailing Week, and the GDR immediately added that the FRG sailors were not wanted at the Wamamunda Week in July. From Czechoslovakia, it is announced that from now on, players and coaches will not receive work permits for those countries in the West that have decided to boycott the Olympics. This is likely to affect some footballers and especially ice hockey players.
British shooters can go.
An extraordinary general meeting of the British Shooting Association has overturned the Executive Committee's boycott decision and decided to leave the decision on participation in the Olympic Games in Moscow solely to the 10 selected shooters themselves. On instructions from London, the British ambassador in Moscow, Sir Curtis Keeble, will be absent from his official residence in the Soviet-Russian metropolis for the duration of the Olympic Games expressly because of the military intervention in Afghanistan, so as not to have to fulfill any Olympic protocol obligations.
American officials present
The American track and field athletes engaged in Olympic eliminations in Eugene have learned with bitterness that they remain victims of the U.S. Olympic boycott, but that various Federation officials are traveling to Moscow with the permission of the Carter administration and at Federation expense. Tages Anzeiger, Zürich, the 23rd of June, 1980.
You are extremely upset.
Athletes up for a fight.
When on the 15th of May, the members of the National Olympic Committee of the Federal Republic of Germany decided by 59-40 against participation in the Moscow Games, the defeated Willy Daum quickly took the microphone and asked for approval for another plenary meeting if the situation changes decisively. Now the situation is there, and as before, it can only be resolved by the sports officials. The Western Europeans will go to Moscow, apart from Norway, Monaco, and Liechtenstein. The hope for signal effect of the German no has failed to materialize. Despite the recommendation of their governments, French, English, and Italian sports leaders decided to travel to the Summer Olympics. Have the Germans disgraced themselves with this? Are they once again alone on the front line? To answer Moscow's invasion of Afghanistan with a boycott of the Games was Jimmy Carter's idea. He knew how to implement it in his own country, albeit not with the most subtle means. And he expected the solidarity of the European allies, above all the Germans. But they resisted long enough. Even on his way back from his last visit to Carter, the Chancellor thought an Olympic boycott would be a stupid thing to do, because the world will not be any different also after the end of the Games on the 5th of August. His foreign minister, however, preached solidarity with the USA from the start, also in the Olympic question, and his fresh-faced, cheerful, free democratic friend, Willy Weyer, gave him support as president of the German Sports Federation. Only when his friend Giscard promised him that no French athlete would run in Moscow if the Germans also passed, did Schmidt change his mind to a no. The governments in London, The Hague, or Rome also seemed serious about enforcing a boycott. But they were all just waiting for the signal from Bonn, it seemed. Schmidt felt called upon to set the course, especially since Carter, who was becoming increasingly impatient, had to be appeased. The error took its course. More than just a recommendation from the federal government to the Olympic Committee was not given, but the way it sold its position to the officials at the two chancellors' rapports resembled moral blackmail. The decision of the Bundestag and the admonitions of the federal president also intimidated the sports leaders even more than the blank threats of the U.S. Vice President Mondale had intimidated the American NOK members weeks before. The result is well known. Also, Egon Bahr's personal letter to Willy Weyer and the two IOC members Willy Daumer and Berthold Beitz could not change anything, even though the SPD Federal Secretary had said in it what the Chancellor could not bring himself to say. If the German sports representatives should decide in favor of Moscow, this would not automatically endanger the Western alliance. And that is what it was all about. These days, it has become clear how much the Federal Republic is dependent on the USA, not only economically and militarily. America, the protecting power, keeps us morally occupied, and that can sometimes be more painful than having to salute a foreign flag in one's own country. The German government cannot be expected to encourage the athletes to travel to Moscow after all. Their representatives could have changed their mind in Düsseldorf. They certainly would have done so, but on the 15th of May, none of them could have guessed how meaningless the German no would be for its European neighbors. Now, however, the German sport is threatened with being sidelined. So it must be given the right to reconsider the Düsseldorf decision, perhaps to come to a yes. Scruples are superfluous here. Jimmy Carter also told the German Chancellor in January that he was only politically threatening an Olympic boycott, only to announce a definite no a few days later. Mrs. and the Chancellor himself had corrected his verdict on a boycott of the Games by 180 degrees in the course of the past months, only the other way round. So why should not sports officials also be allowed to adjust their opinion to the latest situation? There is still time. So, sportsmen and sportswomen, let's get on with the fight. Magazine Stern, Hamburg, the 29th of May, 1980.
How should I not be? Damn it again. What do the Olympic Games have to do with all the shit politics? Nothing at all. Quite the contrary, they should be such a work that through them, peace becomes made and peace becomes maintained between the Earth humans, without even a single word of shit politics being dragged in at the same time.
Sure, your words correspond to the deepest truth, and also all your statements about all the concerns are no less laden with truth. But you should not upset yourself because of that, but rather act at the given point in time.
I will, and I certainly will not let on about anything up to then. When should I go at it then?
In the first or second week of February, 1980.
I will do that. Damn it again. I am really neutral, but nevertheless, one truly has to intervene there.
Sure, and you have thereby saved me many words, if I would have had to explain everything to you. But you will still continue to retain your neutrality, even when you will make these things clear at the given point in time. You represent, singly and alone, the facts of actuality, without engaging yourself politically. Thus, no reasonably thinking human being will be able to accuse you of a breach of neutrality. Only when you do your work, you have to appeal, singly and alone, to the facts of actuality.
I will certainly do that, and I will not interfere in political matters. That just is not me. For me, Russia is Russia and America is America, or China is China and Switzerland is Switzerland. And every single human being in one of these or in any other country of the earth is just a human being to me. To me, no one is a Swiss, a Russian, an American, Chinese, German, or anything else that could refer to a nationality. Because to me, everyone is only a human being.
Sure, I know that very well. Also, that you actually think and act in such a manner. And precisely this also gives us the certainty that you will do this difficult upcoming work in the right manner.
While I am honored by your confidence, girl, nevertheless, I still find this earthly shit politics to be the most terrible earthly shit. Unfortunately, I cannot express that differently.
Sure, I understand you very well. I would be very happy and delighted about it if I, too, was able to express myself in such words and feelings as you can do this. I actually envy you because of that.
Then just start cursing, damn it again. It really happens quite automatically when one has a large enough anger in one's belly. Just try it once. Come on, just curse once. Maybe then you will be better.
Does that correspond to your true opinion?
But of course, my golden child. Just curse once strongly.
Should I really do that?
Yes, try it once.
Well, damn.
You say that like a person dying of thirst, who is totally apathetic. There is no feeling in it at all.
I cannot do it differently, however.
Maybe you will still learn it someday. But let's leave that. If it is allowed, then I would like to address a somewhat sensitive question to you.
Sure.
Good. During the Great Journey, you talked with Ta once about the fact that the effective time of our mission would amount to approximately 100 years. before I would clamber around and continue to spread the mission again in this world as another personality. Our contacts have now been running since the month of January, 1975, so the running time, therefore, would have to go until the year 2074, or rather, round it up, until the year 2075. Is that right?
Yes, that is the running time, calculated from the point in time from which you resumed your mission. After a long interruption, you officially started with this again on the date of Tuesday, the 28th of January 1975, at 13 o'clock HRS when I called you.
How exactly you still know that? I could no longer remember it so very exactly. It just was not that important to me. By this I mean the time and the day.
I understand. But now what do you really want to know?
Well, first of all, I would once again like to have detailed information about this effective time. And then, once again, more detailed information about my next incarnation and the further mission associated with it.
Before the year 1980, however, you may not speak of it, and also may not distribute the written information about it.
Until what date?
Until the 3rd month of the year.
The beginning, middle, or end of it?
Not before the 15th day.
So the middle of the month. Good. I will adhere to that.
Sure, you will do that. So listen then. With the beginning of your new mission on the 28th of January, 1975, that effective running time began, which was calculated at approximately 100 years. But this means that the work of your mission should last for about 800 years in its effect, before that point in time comes when your teaching can become fully effective. In other words, I want to declare with this that the effects of your mission work will last for 800 years and will be preparatory for the point in time in the year 2875, when you, as another person, should step once more from the otherworldly area into the light of this material world. Thus, after your leaving of this world, you should only remain in the otherworldly area for a few years, in order then to step into appearance again already in the year 2075, if all the things of the determinations fit themselves together in such a manner that no shifts would come about.
So such a shift would be possible or is even already determined?
Sure, that is, after all the previous failures, very well possible, but it is, even with certainty, no longer probable. You always have to consider, however, that only the form of the culmination point of the life, and thus also the goal of your mission, become predetermined by you, but not an exact establishment of time. An exact determination of time only occurs in each case when a spiritual life form has separated from the material body and has gone into the otherworldly area, in order to work further there as a purely spiritual form and to evolve further. In your highly evolved case, however, the fact is already given that you, in your material life, can make a fairly accurate determination of the year of your next incarnation, but this can still vary a little, so by about 2 to 3 years. This self-determination possibility of the rebirth time of the spirit form still in the material, so in the physical life, can only take place, however, if a life form has already reached a certain spiritual evolution potential, as this is the case with you. However, since you are presently able, in your current physical state, to bring about such a predetermination that is accurate to within 2 to 3 years, then this can still change up to the end of your life in such a manner, through your further evolution, that the data will be very accurate.
That is known to me, but what exactly is the deal with the effective time of the work?
In connection with your former activities as other personalities over many thousands of years, you bore very old and earth-world-renowned names. Your activities, however, were always informative and instructive for the whole earth world and its creatures and life forms. As a prophet, this was also your task, to which you have always voluntarily professed yourself. But as always, it was so that you have never been recognized or acknowledged at the right time in all of your former personalities as the truthful prophet, So not centuries ago, not millennia ago, and not at the present time. But so will it also be in the future. As it is now, so will it also be when you newly step into appearance in your next incarnation. At present, you have been working now in your mission as a prophet since the year 1975, from which effects will result, which will pave your next way for you as of your next incarnation. Thus, you are presently doing a preparatory work, which will bring about quite definite effects, and which will spread out up to the year 2075 in such a manner that quite definite routes for disseminating the teaching will be opened. Up to the year 2075, changes will have resulted from your present works and efforts, which will then help to facilitate your now newly begun mission. Your mission at later times, however, will always be the same as now, also without bell ringings and trombone sounds like it is now. You will not be a herald of a boastful nature, as you also are not now, which is why the humanity of earth neither bends its knees before you now, nor will it bend its knees before you later, like it also did not at former and long past times. But just as you, in your missions as a true prophet of the earth humans, have already previously erected a truthful and new thought structure for them, which they have, however, forgotten or falsified, so also do you now set up such again. Truly, it is exactly the same thought structure as always. It's just that it has fallen into oblivion for the earth humans and, consequently, looks new to them. At the time of your next return as another personality, you will develop this thought structure even further, after which, already then, many years will have had their effect and your teaching will have paved the ways for spirit-directed progress. In particular, it is very important with this that the religious believers learn your teaching, for they are the main earth humans who live in the greatest confusion and fallaciousness. You know that right at the time of your present life, all earthly religions are in a profoundly critical and crisis-ridden situation, which was already to be foreseen thousands of years ago, that it would be like this at this time, which is, indeed, why you had to step into appearance again exactly at this time. This is so because at this bitter time of crisis and destruction, the best time is given for the undermining of all cultic religions and sects. In this sense, you do indeed also work, and indeed very much better than we expected. You do not create any union among all the cultic religions and sects, but rather an undermining, a rift, as well as decay, strife, and destruction, and to be sure, without you attacking them. In particular, you achieve this because you do not largely step among the national masses, but somehow remain hidden and fire out your illuminative arrows from the background. Thus, you do not meet the large organizations of the cultic religions and sects directly. Rather, you meet the single individual, who then brings the strife against the untruthfulness that has developed in him into these organizations, spreads it there, and at the same time begins to destroy and undermine these and to bring these into decay, discord, and downfall. And exactly up to the year 2075, it will have prospered so far in this respect, in accordance with our calculations of the 100-year-long effective time, that your teaching can fully come into effect. You yourself will not appear now or in the future as a rewarder for the cult religious believers, and also not as a condemner or executor of judgment for all those who have lived and acted in the wrong. Again, as always, you are and will be an announcer of truth, a revolutionary against the cruel untruth, a very strong man, like now, who, also at the further coming time, will allow a renewed religious drama to be stirred up and to break loose through truth explanations, and you will also allow certain old traditional rules to play along in this. These, my dear friend, are the facts to be mentioned, but which, for certain reasons, you must still conceal from the public until the month of March 1980.
Thanks. That was very detailed. Actually, I'm glad about all these coming events. For somehow I just feel magnificently pepped up when I can firmly fight against the untruth.
You are a fighter without an equal, not only now but already since time immemorial. That had already arisen in such a manner at primeval times, which is why you were found by us for this mission and asked if you would like to bear it.
As a Lyran import, I probably had no other option on this planet, right?
Sure, but the decision was made by you yourself and with the knowledge of the fact that you would have to lead a very hard fight against the untruth over many thousands of years across a wide variety of personalities. What made this even more aggravating was that you knew that this would have to affect you very badly because due to your difficult mission over the entire time, a very great loneliness would befall you, which will not be removed again until the year 3999, when you leave the Earth again at that time.
As an old Lyran, I very often feel on the Earth anyway, out of place and damn foreign. I really must tell you that once, although I do not want to complain. But anyhow, I have indeed become an Earth human. From my barbarian life here among all the barbarians, I also find this not so very bad. It could, however, really be different in many forms and somewhat better. But on the whole, I am quite content as an auxiliary human. Certainly, the loneliness nearly overwhelms me sometimes, especially when I would like to talk about certain things, and then just no one is there who can understand my thoughts, but I get over it again in each case.
That is well known to me. It would even be of necessity that you would be given more love.
Oh, only unpleasant things could arise from that. Because of that, I would rather close myself off. Oh yes, it would be very nice if everything in this relation could be different or simply somewhat better, but you yourself know that this cannot be done, unfortunately. The difference in evolution is just too great. Moreover, all those who sincerely hold me in love strive very much for me, and this often helps me through unpleasant and difficult hours. The laws of the Earth humans are very complicated and illogical, which is primarily what makes many things aggravating or just simply impossible.
I, too, apparently have not devoted enough attention to you during all this time. I recognize that clearly and plainly from your words. Even though you already moved over from the Lyra region to the Earth at a very early time, I have always disregarded this and have always seen you as an Earth human.
That is what I am now too, and that is how I behave towards you. Only sometimes also this self-deception does not help me.
Sure, I can understand that very well. But from now on, I will try to see you again for that which you truly are. I am sorry, but due to your rigorous effort to present yourself as a genuine Earth human, you have also directed my thoughts in this direction. Thus, I saw you as an Earth human.
Somehow I am indeed also such an Earth twit. For the devil knows how long, I have already clambered around on this world after I came to this planet. Since then, I have lived so many lives here as the most varied personalities that I'm no longer able to count them. I have an earthly physical body with a spirit from the depths of the universe, as I already said once 8,500 years ago as another personality. This earthly body, however, binds me to this planet and is connected with it, from its dust, so to speak, which is why I also have a feeling in me that I somehow belong here. At the same time, I just ask myself, how will I with such a body one day go back to my actual home?
It will no longer be an earthly one.
For at the established point in time, parents for you will come to the Earth, who will procreate your new personality on this world and will give birth to this with your spirit form on your original homeworld, after your spirit form will have taken possession of its descendant in the mother's womb.
Ah, then I am indeed calmed. Does this also happen then with all the others who are still roaming around here on the Earth?
Certainly it will be likewise with them.
That is really comforting to know. But tell me, are there also those in our group who do not come from this planet originally?
Sure, many, but I would not like to mention the names to you now openly. If you want to ask me about that again in June or July of 1980...
Gladly.
Up to then, many new things will indeed occur, which will also bring you joy and relief.
I know. I just ask myself whether it might not still go awry that I should take over a task in a father's stead.
Now you said too much. You should not talk about that openly yet.
I will not give this contact report page out until the middle of March 1980.
Of course, I did not think of that at the moment. Then we can continue to speak of it calmly if you hold back this information.
Good. I still have the question concerning this. What if everything goes awry and the calculations do not fulfill themselves?
The probability speaks for the fulfillment of the determination.
Well, but what if it is suddenly claimed that I am, despite everything, the biological father of the child?
You know who the biological father will be, but it is not you in any case, even though many would gladly like to see that. Just with regard to your wife, it would not be allowed to be so that you could be the biological father. She is, in her development, still not so far along that such a step might be done. She would neither understand nor accept this, not in her present life, unless she could make a large leap in evolution, which is not to be expected with her, however, because she is often inclined to failure and unpredictable jealousy.
That will not be of much use, for I know her damn well. When the time comes, she too will have her thoughts to express, like also many others. Like others, she will be of the view that I am lying to her, and that I am truly the procreator, and therefore, also the true father.
That would be absurd, for you are capable of no such untruth. And moreover, you know that the descendant will be procreated by another man, if the other fertilization and procreation possibility cannot be taken into consideration. But we will talk about these things again at a later time.
But that is still of no use to me. I can already imagine the drama now, which will let loose around me. Just on the part of my cannibal alone.
It is to be hoped that in this regard she will have become of another sense by then, and will grasp your words and explanations as truth.
There, you know her poorly, however. She will think that I am lying, and thus that I am the biological father.
That may not be true, for you will actually not be the biological father, but will only take over the father's role after the birth of the descendant.
You just do not understand this. Many women of the earth are just not so far along as you all, who give your husbands faith when they tell you all something.
We do not know such untruths anymore.
Of course not. Otherwise you could also understand my damn problem. When an earth woman has something placed in her head, she does not let go of it so quickly. And that my Agapula will hammer the crazy idea into her head, that I would have fathered the child myself. I know this in advance. At the same time, I know it too well.
But that is indeed absolutely illogical. If you explain the truth to her, then she has to accept this nevertheless.
One should be able to have such dreams, as you preserve and maintain them.
It is, after all, only the truth and reality.
For you, yes, but not for earth twits. But you do not understand that, unfortunately. Let's just leave it at that.
It is, perhaps, also better, for up to then some time will still pass, and during this certainly very much will still change.
I also do not deny that, but in this respect you may not give yourself any hopes. Moreover, I do not think, despite my hopes, that my wife will change, because more and more, I suspect that she is only acting and is leading all of you, me, and all the others around by the nose, which the future will surely prove, as well as her betrayal together with the brothers K and H and various other members, who, according to your statements, will soon have to be excluded from the group or who will jump out themselves in a slanderous manner.
We will see then.
And I already see it now.
You see everything too confusedly and too darkly, at least in regard to your wife.
I could hardly see these things more clearly. Take that from me calmly.
Do you really mean that?
But of course. As I say it, so will it be.
That would be very indelicate towards you and your honesty, as well as towards us and all group members.
Indelicate? That is a fine word, really. Truly, this indelicacy will be quite damn crude and illogical, as well as mangy, treacherous, and defamatory.
Let's let time work, nevertheless.
That is probably the most sensible thing. Let us talk about it again in the next year and the year after the next, if it should be necessary.
Sure, let's wait for what is coming.
Certainly. But what will the date actually be then?
Are you thinking of the birth?
Right.
I would not like to announce that to you because at the given time, you will try to calculate the exact date anyway. But unfortunately, the circumstances of the failure of the responsible physicians will not allow your calculations to turn out correctly.
Does that mean that there will be difficulties?
That is, unfortunately, inevitable because the bearing organs of the mother, according to our cognitions, are not functioning in the form that is necessary for the birth to be able to take place normally through these.
Even that too, as if I already had not had enough with the 3 cesarean sections of my cannibal. Your words do mean that, right?
Sure, but there is no reason for you to be concerned, for when the time comes other than a delayed birth, no major difficulties will appear.
But after that, what then?
I do not know because so far I have only tried to determine the time and form of the birth. This will, however, be about 1.5 days later than what you, which I am sure of, are going to calculate with very great accuracy.
Shit. This will change certain important factors, which the child is to bring along, right? And what will it be anyway? I mean, what gender will it be?
It will be a boy. That I will grant you, telling you that, but everything else, you have to calculate yourself. Concerning the certain factors addressed by you, it will, unfortunately, be as you say, that another time very many things will be changed in such a manner that these cannot come into effect in such a manner as what should be the case in providence and determination. This, however, we are unable to change, and you too will not be able to do anything in this regard.
Then I can only wait once again and twiddle my thumbs. That is indeed still to be coped with. That also in this case, again, only a cesarean section can lead to birth. That is a bit much. Such a birth makes me even more insecure than what a normal birth already does.
You are very worried. Sure, it will not go without a surgical intervention, but there is no reason for concern there.
But why does it always have to be like that? Damn it again! This means, once again, that I must keep my mouth shut for many months, for I cannot tell the girl in advance in what manner the child will come into the world. Through that, I would only evoke unrest and, above all, severe psychological difficulties and anxiety as well as fear.
So it would be, which is why you really have to be silent about these things for the time being.
Once again, that gives me pleasant times, and I'm looking forward to it already.
I understand you perfectly, and I also feel a certain sorrow inside of me for you. It is probably better if we do not speak of this anymore for now. I also still have other matters to discuss with you, apart from me just talking with you about these things.
Of course, but it still makes me wonder whether the child will suffer any damage due to the birth delay, whether it will have an abnormality.
No, you can be unconcerned about that. The only damage will be that certain capabilities must be developed in him in an especially hard self-effort with the help of you all. Normally, the prerequisites would have been more easily given. Therefore, the descendant would have learned this on his own and without help from outside.
Is that really the entire damage?
Surely.
Then I am calmed.
Good. Then I can speak again of other things. You told me in the course of our conversation that you have calculated some dates of the future?
Right.
At the same time, we also spoke of the head of state of Yugoslavia, of his demise. Concerning him, have you calculated the exact time of death and the date of his leaving of this sphere?
I have written everything down on this slip of paper. At the same time, it's just strange that I was able to calculate 2 different dates. The first is the 24th of February, 1980. The time for this is 10:10 p.m. The second date is the 4th of May, 1980, and the time for this is 3:04 p.m. and 47 seconds. The fact that there are now 2 dates, I do not understand.
Your calculations are very well right, and the one date, like the other one, is of correctness. Tito, the Yugoslavian dictator, will unofficially conclude his physical life on the date of the 24th of February, 1980, or rather, he should do this at this point in time. Truthfully, however, it will be like it was at that time with Generalissimo Francesco Franco in Spain, that he will have an agonizing death because the doctors, with all their arts and machines, will keep him alive for so long until death officially occurs on the 4th of May, 1980. From the 24th of February, 1980, however, it will be for Tito that he will no longer be in a position of power, without the possibility of being able to do anything in the slightest in the affairs of state. Unofficially, he will thus already be dead as of this date.
Ah, now I understand.
Have you also even made any calculations regarding Persia, that is to say Iran?
No.
Then I will still explain a few events to you, which can be of importance for you. Around the turn of the year 1980, fanatical and Khomeini-loyal student elements will overtake the American embassy in Tehran and will take all of the embassy personnel as hostages. This will lead to serious difficulties in the domestic and foreign policy of America, as well as to very inconsiderate and rather childish actions of the American president, who, among other things, will allow an attempt to be carried out to free the hostages, which will be doomed for failure from the very beginning. The victims here will only be the prisoners in the American embassy, but also around a dozen American families in the USA. Because of Carter's insane rescue operation for the hostages, around 12 American soldiers will lose their lives through a misfortune. Due to the irrationality, incompetence, and confusion of the American president, the action with the aircraft unfit for this purpose will be started. The largest part of these machines will be destroyed due to their own unfitness, together with approximately 12 human lives of the volunteer command. These events will still further stir up the crisis already going on for many months until then between the Americans and Iran, and it also will not find an end so soon after this time. This is especially so, because also in the interior of the country of Persia, various power groups provide worries, problems, and acts of war to the revolutionary state, and because the Islamic leader Ayatollah Khomeini, who has fallen to insanity, will have beaten the majority of the Iranian people into mad fanaticism that serves him. This will ultimately lead to the fact that the first external acts of terrorism will find their beginning outside of the country. Thus, namely, first in England where the Iranian embassy will likewise be occupied and hostages will be taken another time. But also this doing will bring about its bad consequences.
Do you mean with your words from just now that this Khomeini has already now fallen to insanity?
Yes, that is the sense of my words. He still is not in the full stage, but this will already soon be the case.
Then one could not even talk sensibly with the guy anymore?
No.
What I still wanted to ask, to where then will the Shah and his Shahban disappear?
President Carter of America will commit the inexcusable mistake that he grants the fugitives temporary asylum, which will also contribute to the effects in the embassy in Tehran.
You speak of a temporary asylum. Where will the guy then go after that, this super murderous knave?
If I would tell you everything, then this would take too long.
But this much I will explain, that Pahlavi, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, overthrown Shah of Iran, has already been suffering from cancer for quite some time, and therefore will be treated in America. After that, his next place of refuge will be Panama and then Egypt, where he will undergo further medical treatments.
His end, in any case, will be inglorious.
His end will be very agonizing, but let that be enough with these explanations for this case.
As you wish. Do you still have other news?
Surely also for your country.
You mean Switzerland? What should be great there? I have only calculated that a lot will happen in Switzerland as well. In Bern there will be murder and mayhem, because there an embassy will be stormed. Also Geneva and Zurich will not remain spared from terror and anarchy enterprises. In addition, Criminal activity will horribly take the upper hand. And in Zurich, one morning shortly after the turn of the year 1980, it will come to a major bank robbery attempt, during which 2 gangsters and a policeman will be shot. Furthermore, starting from 1980, Switzerland will be littered in its entire area by rampant murders, and political difficulties will enter into appearance, which are of a nature that was previously unknown in Switzerland. Nuclear power plants will be attacked by radical groups, whereby severe destruction of the same are also calculable. In the Bundesrat Federal Council itself, in the upcoming time starting from 1980, there will arise internal difficulties and differences, which will lead to dubious instances of maladministration and will evoke certain changes in the government itself. And which I would have nearly forgotten. In the month of April 1980, Switzerland will, for the first time, receive an official state visit from England by a royal couple. Elizabeth and Philip will visit Switzerland.
You have calculated very much.
I have, yes, but, nevertheless, that some things would still interest me, for which I simply did not have the time to calculate.
Sure. What do you want to know, then?
You are still surely able to remember well what was said about the comings and goings of Tito's death by that prophecy, which I had received years ago.
You speak of that prophecy.
Certainly. It was transmitted to me at that time that at the time of Tito's death, a quake would roll through the seas.
Sure, but I do not understand what you want to aim at with your question.
That is quite simple. I see something in this, that it must be more than just a simple seaquake. The way I understand it, this seaquake must only be the actual origin for something very much worse. I imagine that I understand something of prophecies. Thus, I am able to recognize certain things from them, which remain hidden to the laypersons.
I know that this is so, and you have also supposed correctly.
Good. Then first of all, tell me where this seaquake will take place and what will come after that. This quake is only a precursor, right?
Unfortunately, yes, and it will be in the ocean west of America.
Aha, now I already understand a little more. Am I right in accepting that this quake precursor is associated with the Andreas Fault?
Yes.
Aha, then this can also mean that somewhere in America a volcano will suddenly go off, right?
You are very perceptive. Yes, it is so. A volcano lying dormant for many decades will suddenly break out in order to bring death and destruction over the vast country. It will be Mount St. Helens, which will destroy very much life and bury much land under itself. The seaquake arising around the time of Tito's death will not be very strong, so it will not move the human beings of the earth. But this quake will be a bad omen for the imminent outbreak of the St. Helens volcano, which stands in connection with the Andreas Fault, which itself extends from the high north of Western America until deep into the south of the country. The scientists will first make no connection at all with the small seaquake to the volcanic eruption. They will also suppose after the first time that the volcano will soon come to rest again. But they will be mistaken in this because they will not be looking for a direct connection from it to the Andreas Fault. Already about 10 days after the outbreak, however, some scientists will think about the events and recognize that the Andreas Fault plays a significant role in these events. At this time, it will, however, already be the case that in the area of San Francisco, severe earthquakes occur. And these will first bring the scientists to the fact that the Andreas Fault is in play. At the same time, think of the prophecy that was given to you on the 2nd of February, 1976. There is talk in this of the fact that San Francisco will be destroyed. With the outbreak of the St. Helens volcano, the time becomes complete, in which the beginning of the end assumes its actual beginning. About this, it stands word for word in the prophecy brought into verse form by you, and the city at the fault becomes totally buried.
I know, but I have not learned the prophecy by heart.
Of course not, but for that I can recite it to you by heart.
Really? Then do that at once.
As you wish. Under smoking, grayish-black, conical mountains, very many hellfires become fatally smoldering. They liquefy sand and earth and rock deep in the earth within and without sunshine. Deep in the earth's interior, hot magma masses bubble, greedily reaching upward and onto the earth. Exploding, they hurl their fire upwards through the throat of the mountain, the gate of fire. Crashing, they spew out their glowing masses, destroying humans, animals, plants. Oh, horror! And even the seas become churned deep down. The earth has already felt this for so very long. Angry volcanic fires tear up the image of the world, and all over great cries of horror shrill. But it's still not enough when it burns, for the earthquake rushes ahead and behind, destroying, roaring. It destroys everything, and no one is able to soothe the calamity. The volcanic fires race and the earth quakes all around, unwaveringly destroying life after life. It lets new islands arise in the seas while humans on sinking lands plead. The time of the first destruction is already there, in the south of the land of the old native inhabitants of America. This land is badly affected in the coming time, as well as the land where black humans hope. Also, Europe does not remain spared from the evil, for also there, under the land, lives hell. From the land of the boot, one will speak very sadly, and also from the lands with the boon of earth gold. Also, the land with the cherry blossom becomes shaken, and the city at the fault becomes totally buried. Also, the people and land of the lion sword suffer, and the star in the half moon does not become avoided. Also, the land of the gods becomes maliciously affected, the lands of the dragon and of the hope of peace, when the fires of the volcanoes infernally blaze and earthquakes tear up everything in many lands. So it already happens in the coming days, beginning with very many thousands of lamentations of death, announcing the time of terror through those dying. In the south of Latin American country grounds, there first, the earthquakes claim very many lives, and then volcanic fires unexpectedly blaze. The coming times, they bring great sorrow, and over the earth then lies a shroud of death. So I now hereby write it down solidly. It is coming, Earth human, right now.
Fantastic. You can actually do it by heart.
Sure, also every other prophecy which you have written in solid form.
You flatter me very much.
It gives me joy to repeat your poems.
That is dear of you, but the prophecy just repeated by you refers not only to the coming events, but also to other ones, which already arrived years ago. It is a rather far-reaching series, which reaches until far into the future.
Sure, I also only mentioned it because it even mentions the coming events. It has already had validity since the year 1976, whereby various things mentioned in it have already happened. But at the point in time of Tito's death, the events begin to fulfill themselves in an increased measure, which the humanity of Earth will have to ascertain with fright. Maybe then the most diverse human beings will remember your prophecies and realize that very much more is hidden in them than what they wanted to admit before. Then also will many human beings realize that your mission is not of lying and fraud as it wants to be and will be slanderously denied.
You speak in riddles. It is, after all, always denied that I speak the truth and really also have contact with you. I have long been accustomed to the fact that I am accused as a swindler and fraud.
Sure, that is a word of truth, but with the year 1980, there will come a time for you where you will be increasingly exposed to very evil, untruthful, and defamatory attacks. Various people well known to you, former evil-minded group members, will slander you publicly with lies and defamation, while also otherwise, not in the least through the intrigues of these betrayers and traitors, your work and everything else will be disturbed and endangered.
With your publicly, you are probably thinking of the authorities, right?
On the one hand, yes.
And who are these dear ones, then?
You will find them out soon enough. At any rate, they are, at this point in time, still official group members.
Good grief, now I know. For a year and a day, there has been continuous discontent and controversy through lies and intrigues by the brothers K and H, but especially because of H. These two, then, will probably soon no longer be in our group. And how mean and full of intrigue particularly H can be, every single member knows. He has, through evil writings, already brought many human beings into the devil's kitchen, just as often as through his verbal attacks of perfected maliciousness.
You simply have an admirable gift of deduction.
It does not take much to fathom these things after your remarks.
In any case, the coming time will be quite unpleasant for you.
I can vividly imagine that myself, for I know H only too well. It often seems to me that he is maliciousness and notorious mendaciousness in person.
With which you do not have it so wrong.
Then I will just let the things approach me. I also cannot do more.
That is true, but on the other hand, it would also still be too early if you wanted to deal with these matters of the future already now. Calmly let the time pass, because nothing at all could be changed anyways.
Then it is in any case so that the brothers K and H soon will not be in our group anymore. You speak clearly enough.
Sure, that is unalterable.
Then I can, once again, play more theater until everything has come so far. I would really prefer it a lot sometimes if I knew a bit less.
I can sympathize with you, but when a human being has reached a certain state of evolution, these things automatically come up to him, which he must then work with and manage.
That's known to me, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes. You should remember, however, that you should be especially careful starting from the year 1980, for the dangers in reference to your life will likewise increase rapidly.
That makes me worry the least of all. As long as my senses always warn me ahead of time of something evil, so long can I be somehow safe. You do know that I either tend to dream certain things in advance, or that I am made aware of such by my painful wrenching in the small of my back.
This fact is well known to me, but consider with this that all of this depends on your overall balance. If this is even only minimally impaired once by aggravation or grief, then these warnings can fail.
I know that.
I know that you are aware of that, but still you should be very careful. It may one day also simply be so that you react too late or that you become immobilized by an excessive pain.
Do you mean because of the occurring and warning pains in the small of my back?
Yes, they could suddenly increase so much that you lose control of your reaction.
You mean that is possible?
Surely.
I have never thought about that, because so far I was always able to control these things.
That could be different someday. Hence, be careful.
Well, thanks for the tip. If it should be like that someday, then I will certainly try desperately.
That you will, but it could still be very dangerous. You simply do not take these matters seriously enough.
I do not do that, but an assassination attempt does not particularly excite me.
That makes no impression at all on you, and exactly that could be extremely dangerous for you. It would be better for you if you could feel a stirring or something otherwise in such situations. But sometimes it seems to me that at such moments your whole interior only consists of a deadly cold. I have already often had the impression that I had heard the clinking of cracking ice when I analyzed everything in you after such incidents.
Now you are really exaggerating excessively.
Not at all, because in this relation I work very precisely, and on the other hand I am not inclined to exaggerations.
I know that, but here it now seems to me to be the case nevertheless.
You speak against your better knowledge.
Fine, you have won. Do you still have anything else?
Actually, no.
Then I have another question. When I begin my action against the Olympic boycotting in 1980, will this then be of success?
On the whole, yes. It will be the merit of you and your group that the Olympic Games continue to exist and one day become anti-politicized. But at the same time, it will be such that in this respect, you will not reap any attention or thanks in the world public as the real initiator, at least not for the time being, because it will be concealed that through your initiative alone, the Olympic idea will continue to exist and continue to be exercised. The authoritative responsible persons of the states and sports associations of all countries will make everything out to be as though it was their decision. Truthfully, however, they will act in accordance with your action when the time has become ripe for it. They are much too fond of themselves for them to admit that their affirmative decision to participate in the Olympics resulted from your action alone. A fondness from which they want to profit and look great.
Nevertheless, that essentially makes no difference. After all, it is only important that the games are held and carried out.
Still, it is very regrettable that those responsible in this case will claim the fame for themselves. But unfortunately, this probably will not change, because the future does not say that you will one day be named publicly as the savior of the Olympic idea.
I can also do without that, as I do not care about that at all. Moreover, the group members will do the main work, for they will take over all the printing, the sorting together, addressing, inserting, and mailing at that time. With only one hand, I will indeed be rather hindered, so I will need their assistance then.
The most important and main work will be up to you then, for it will be your task to put all the necessities on paper. But let's leave this, for I already know that I will lose in this connection if I want to argue with you. You are simply stubborn in relation to this, when it concerns your merits.
Well roared, lioness. Then I have peace before your remarks. But tell me, do you already know, in the approximate framework, what % of all countries of the Olympic allies will decide for the implementation?
Not exactly, because in this respect I have made no exact calculations. However, the participation might move within the framework of approximately 58 to 64%.
That means that somewhat more than half of all countries involved will participate in the Olympics?
Yes, if my superficial calculations are right.
That already means so much to me, that it will be like that.
Then we have discussed all the necessary interests for now.
These, therefore, are the values of the future, but you may let these be reported publicly, as explained, always only when the individual events have already arrived. Only the group may be informed like usual with predictions.
The case is clear. But Quetzal is also finished with my writing. What do you think of it?
Everything in it is described, presented, and explained very much better than what would have been possible for me to do. However, you should modify certain things a little, in the sense that you interweave some values, which have been worked out for you all by the High Council for a long time in accordance with earthly values. The giving of laws and recommendations, you should absolutely work these into your work, which then requires, however, as said, some changes in reference to transpositions. If it is opportune for you, then I can transmit these laws and recommendations to you tomorrow, so that you do not come into default with your work relating to this.
That would be good, even if it means that I practically have to start from scratch again. But it will certainly be worthwhile when I see everything correctly. But tell me, since I am on this subject right now and am writing The Law of Love, how does it actually stand with you all on Era with regard to marriage? You, Quetzal, are you actually married, and if so, how many children do you have? And you, Ptah, your wife, is she your only one?
The law of love has overall universal validity, only that it very often becomes changed by the most diverse human races according to their own human and illogical negative values. Thus, they often create a monogamous marriage, which is literally restricted to only one woman and one man for such a marriage and such a family. The truthfulness of monogamy, as you have so aptly disassembled for me once, no longer applies. And I think that you have done this just as aptly in your draft, which you handed over to Quetzal for study.
That is of correctness. He has presented it very aptly and in detail.
That was to be expected with your awareness of duty. Well then, I was married to 3 women, which corresponds to the minimum value of a we-form partnership of universal expanse. Nevertheless, out of the 3, the only one living is the mother of my deceased son and my 2 daughters, for the other 2 have left me by means of death, the one already more than 300 years ago, and the other one more than 360 years ago.
Aha, and how many years old is your still remaining wife?
630 years.
Nice. So old would one also have to be. Then there would still be the opportunity to learn a great deal more. But what about further descendants? Do you have even more?
No, my current wife only bore me 3 children.
Well, thanks for your information. So what about you, Quetzal?
He is pampered by 4 very beautiful women and has 6 children with them.
You smile so suspiciously, girl. You seem to be really happy about it.
Sure, his wives are my best friends, and they always wish that I shall become the 5th in their alliance.
And Quetzal, what do you say to that?
Sim, Ya, Say, and I are of another opinion than my wives.
And why, if one may ask?
I would not like to marry again. On the one hand, because the loss of a human being by death gives me very much grief. And on the other hand, because I have found a very important task in my activities, which can hardly be reconciled with a marriage.
But girl, death should not mean losing a person for you, if I understand your losing correctly. Or is it meant in the same way as I feel it?
I know your feelings. Yes, I mean it in that sense.
I understand. Please excuse me. I did not want to hit you in your inside.
Someone else could probably do that, but you are not able to do that because I know your feelings too well. Do not worry.
Thanks, girl. You are very dear.
I also still have a question to bring up. How is the construction of the new pyramid coming along?
Unfortunately, badly, for I must think up something else, since I probably need to connect this building to the shelters.
You know, nevertheless, that the time does not pause.
Yes, but still, I have to rethink everything and find another and more suitable place.
You can explain that to me more precisely at our next meeting, but you must be aware that time is gradually running out.
I am clear about this, my son, and I will do my best.
Good.
I also still have to give you an important instruction. You now know very many events of the future, which may not become officially known under any circumstances. Hence, it is now assigned to you that you must be even more cautious than ever before, that in no way can any data be officially elicited from you. This means that you should and must be very careful that you do not come into the influence of drugs, etc., which could be given to you or forced into you. But this also means that you must be careful that you also are not connected to mechanical devices or apparatuses which could elicit anything from you or which would force you to speak.
You probably mean essentially the so-called truth serums and lie detectors, etc., right?
That is of extreme exactness and correctness. You may never get involved in such things, but also not in suggestion and hypnosis, where the latter could, under certain circumstances, end fatally for the practitioner.
I know, but why are you telling me all that, for I know that myself well enough.
A recent investigation has yielded that it is being urged by various parties for you to undergo such methods for surrendering your secrets, in which you may never get involved, however. But this refers not only to those things that my daughter and I have mentioned to you just now, but also to all events in our context up to now, and your knowledge, etc., since ages ago.
Aha, now I can also understand you better and also know what you are talking about. Surely, the whole thing also has to do with the fact that the Russians should have received new and mysterious weapons allegedly from extraterrestrial intelligences, and should have gained advantages towards the Americans in this respect as well as in space travel.
That is of correctness, my friend, and that is exactly why also the Secret Service agent of the Secret Service was delegated to address you about the data relating to this and about the possibility of our help.
You know about that? And how do you stand on this?
It would be very unwise if I did not look after these matters and hence did not know that the Secret Service turned to you through, upon which you, as we expected, only responded evasively, however. However, we would be given an opportunity to provide minor progress information if this were required. But this would only refer to behavior patterns. but not to technological plans. Et furthermore, it is still to be explained by me that no extraterrestrial group is responsible for it, for being helpful to Russia on a technological basis, especially not in reference to space travel or to the production of new weapons. So far, we could not find any indications for the fact that Russia and the USA have any extraterrestrial assistance for any such matters concerning this, so all of their previous inventions and progress of this kind only fall in the area of the normal, and are the work of the earthly scientists who, like all other scientists of the earth, receive only those impulses that do not let them go overboard. But now, my friend, our time is well advanced, and we must go again. Farewell, and be careful.
Well then, bye, Ptah, and all the best. Also, you both, be cautious and come again soon.
We will meet again next week. Till we meet again.
Till we meet again.
Watch out for yourself, too, and be careful. Till we meet again, my dear friend.
Bye, girl. Take care, everyone.
Maya has often been criticized for not releasing detailed, prophetically accurate information until after the prophesied events have already occurred. In this connection, the following information, from Simya-Sei's 35th sentence up to and including her 100th sentence, was first published in the English language as part of the first appendix of Wendell Stevens' book, Message from the Pleiades Volume 2, which has a copyright date of 1990. Wendell preceded the translation of this section with a very interesting note, which appears on pages 351 and 352, part of which reads as follows. In a contact on the 19th of October 1978, a discussion of detailed, prophesied events came up. We jump forward here to that contact, at this time, because the time of taking down the Ptah prophecies is the time of these present contacts in 1976. Also because I was able to personally observe the outworking of some of those prophecies in 1979 when I was in Europe. One of these was the invasion of North Vietnam by China. Another was the storming of the Iranian embassy in London by London Bobbies, and a third was the abdication of Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands in favor of her daughter Beatrix, all of which I had been told to expect by Edward Meyer before the event actually happened. In a discussion of this in his house on the 9th of March 1979, Mr. Meyer offered to show me his restricted notes on prophecies that had already come to pass. Wanting evidence for myself, I asked for copies of the pages listing only the events mentioned which had already occurred. I was fully aware of Meyer's promise to both Simya-Sei and the Ptah sphere not to reveal events before their time. He handed the notes to Eva and sent her out of the room to make copies of those pages for me. While she was doing that, Meyer was called to the telephone. While he was still talking on the phone, Eva came back with the copies and handed them to me, which I stuck in my briefcase. When Meyer came back from the telephone, he asked me if I had been given the copy pages, and I said yes, and patted my briefcase. When I looked at the notes later, I discovered that Eva had misunderstood and gave me more pages than Meyer intended, because there were prophecies that had not yet been fulfilled. I decided to keep Meyer's promise not to release information on events before their time, but when I got home, I allowed two good friends of mine to read the notes in full for future confirmation. Those two men were Major Rudolph Pestalozzi, USAF Ret, and Mr. O. Richard Norton, former director of the Flandreau Planetarium at the University of Arizona in Tucson.